Hi, we're new old friends. I'm Fergus West-Dunlop.
And I'm Heather Westwell. Welcome to Chapter 8 of Crimes Against Christmas!
Ooh.
Betty, the island's cook, has been discovered murdered in the kitchen, and Peter Artridge and fellow guests are now stranded on the island of Richenstan for 3 nights with an unknown killer. Let's find out what happens next. Chapter 8. Not So Naive.
The atmosphere in the dining room was odd. Each group had completed their searches without finding any more nasty surprises, and the lingering shock and fear caused by Betty's death was mixed now with a palpable sense of relief and accomplishment. I was still keen to assert myself as a potential leader in this time of crisis, and scurrying in at the summons of the old Duke hardly cast me in the courageous light I felt suited me best. So I took it upon myself to loudly thank the Duke for assembling everyone here, and launched into a rather hearty little speech. I'm not claiming it was Prince Hal at the Battle of Agincourt, but it had a decent bit of pep to it all the same. I started off by double-checking the obvious. None of the groups had found Drummer. However, I phrased my question too ambiguously for a clear response, and a room full of heads either nodded or shook at me. Not a great start at uniting this band of brothers behind me, so I reached for the rhetorical comfort of flattery. I lauded the bravery and courage of our little company, our troop, our unit. We had all, without hesitation, struck out into the unknown to search for what might very well have been a dangerous villain, but who could equally still be a comrade in need of our support. I was laying it on a bit thick, I suppose, but you have to remember I'd had quite a day of it. Sea travel, pre-dinner boozing, discovery of a body, and a hazardous hike around half the island, and all on an empty stomach to boot. It was beginning to have the desired effect. My audience were sitting or standing that little bit straighter now, and looking at me with chins noticeably raised. I was doing it. St. Crispin's Day was in sight. I rounded off the oration by imploring my new disciples to remain buoyant and calm. I assured them we would, with prudent leadership, see off this ordeal with grace and poise. We must simply stick to our guns and not panic. It's possible my choice of words in closing could have been better, prompting as they did 2 outbursts on either side of the scale.
"Guns? That's the bloody ticket! Must have some left in the arsenal!"
exclaimed the Duke, rather missing my point, but not missing it quite so spectacularly as Father Vickers.
"Not panic! We're trapped on a remote island with a murderous maniac intent on staving in our skulls like soft-boiled eggs. You talk of grace and poise when some heathen is running around determined to kill me!"
Before continuing, I feel it's only fair to report that I'm certain, practically certain, that had it not been for this brace of interruptions, the rest of the room was braced to burst into bracing applause. I'm not saying they'd have lifted me upon their shoulders and carried me out like a victorious gladiator, but it was a distinct possibility had momentum not been so definitely dashed by these 2 saboteurs of the moment. There was no time to reflect, though. The old Duke stormed out, precipitating a mass exodus as people headed for the sanctuary and safety of their locked bedrooms. I'm humbled to report that I found myself pathetically shouting after them.
"I think perhaps what's needed is a good night's sleep. Yes, well done. Let's all retire for the evening and be sure to bolt our doors."
Sleep well, Mr. Artridge,
offered Michelle as she and Turtle followed the herd out. It was disheartening to have come so close to taking command of the situation, and so quickly be reduced to effectively commentating on proceedings. In no time at all I'd gone from being the centre of attention, all eyes adoringly looking to me for guidance, to shouting empty noise after my erstwhile charges. At this low ebb, it came as a bit of a shock that Vickers had remained lingering in the room and clearly wanted more of my counsel. I filled 2 tumblers with a good measure of port from the decanter on the elegant sideboard and handed one to the priest. I have to make it clear that the tumblers were the only glasses I could see. I know my drinking vessels.
"What was all that about then, Vickers, eh? You've got yourself all riled up."
"We're safe, I'm sure of it." He took a deep draught of the purplish drink and sighed.
"I hope you're right. I'm sorry to have caused a scene, but what if he comes after me next? I couldn't fight him off. I wouldn't know how."
"You won't need to, Father. We're all going to keep each other safe. Besides, what reason could Drummer possibly have for wanting to do you harm? You've never met him before, have you?"
"Well, that assumes that it is Drummer now, doesn't it?"
"Come now, who else could it be? Betty gets murdered and the only person missing is Mr. Drummer. No, this seems like an open and shut case to me." The priest wasn't to be quite so easily convinced, though.
But what if that is exactly the killer's plan, Mr. Artridge? They make us all suspect Drummer so they can go about their murderous business above suspicion. For many impostors, seducers, deceivers and false leaders have gone out into the world. Such a one is the impostor, the seducer, the deceiver, the false leader, the antagonist of Christ and the Antichrist. John 1:7.
Do you really believe any of them could do such a thing, though, Father?
I can believe anything of them, including you, Mr. Artridge. I don't know a soul here, so can't vouch for the goodness of or the wickedness contained therein.
I couldn't refute his point. There was no way of knowing the inner goodness of any of the people here, so I returned to the issue of motive, which I rather felt to be a winner. But what possible reason could anyone have to kill you, Drummer, or Betty?
That I don't know, but I wouldn't trust anyone on this island. I hear confessions all the time, so I know when dirty little secrets are being kept, when people are hiding things, holding something inside of them. By now I can practically smell the guilt in the air. There are secrets being kept on this island. Trust me.
I knew the priest wasn't wrong. I was here under false pretences, and it was fairly obvious Lady Duplantis was enjoying some extramarital escapades. Although, as she was so flagrant with it, perhaps that didn't count as a secret. I still thought it better to try and keep my cover, so aimed to ally Vickers to my side by employing my most syrupy manner.
I do trust you, Father. Then you're not listening close enough.
His holy hand snapped up, jabbing an accusatory finger in my face.
You must trust nobody.
Of course. I nodded. Now, excuse me. I'm going to my room to pray before bed. Good night, Father. I opened the door and stepped aside to let him pass. He paused directly in front of me with his eyes glinting behind the round windows of his glasses.
Or am I?
I'm not sure, I ventured, hoping this would satisfy him. And thankfully I judged it correctly. A broad smile spread across his face and he tapped me proudly on the nose.
Exactly right. You can't know, can you? But in this case, I am, actually. Would you like to join me in a quick prayer before bed?
Oh, I'm not feeling particularly worshipful right now, I'm afraid, Father. Forgive me. Well, I can't forgive you officially, I'm afraid, not outside of the confessional. But I do understand. Sleep well, Mr. Artridge. Then I was alone, in the beautifully appointed Richtenstein dining room, and my mind was racing. I had had my suspicions before, but for all of his Catholic flappery, I must admit that the priest had hit a nerve. Maybe it was a touch too convenient that Drummer had just upped and disappeared like this. But who else on the island could have killed the cook? Poor Betty. I gave the ivy-festooned door a quick glance to be sure it was shut, poured myself another port, and pulled out my notebook to take stock. I decided that Missy the maid was above suspicion for now. She wasn't a good enough actor to pull off the performance of utter shock she was giving. And for now I'd also discounted Butler and Duplantis. I didn't think it would be possible for them to leave the Great Hall and get to the kitchen in time, and surely Duplantis couldn't hope to kill his cook in his own house and get away with it. I couldn't see Turtle and Michelle wielding a lead pipe, and the same goes for the titled women, Lady Duplantis and the Princess. It wasn't the scruples of these two that put them in the clear, so much as the fact I didn't think they'd stoop to committing the act themselves. The old Duke, however, clearly wouldn't blanch at a bit of violence. But Betty was no waif, and there were clear signs of a struggle. My money would have been on the cook in a physical altercation between the two. The Duke's skin appeared to be held up by a skeleton of pipe cleaners and twine at this point. All of which left just one guest. A man who had freely admitted to operating outside of the law, and around whom hung the whiff of violence. Don Crimine. I was all set to stride manfully up to his room and have a jolly good knock in order to have a word or two with the shady Italian to get some things straight, when the door opened and revealed him in all his pinstripe glory, working a silver pick between his teeth. I leapt to my feet, hastily pocketing my notebook, and as I did so, my chair gave out the most remarkable sound. It was almost as if a grown man had shrieked in fear like a small child. Ah, Mr. Artridge. Crimine's accent was thicker now, and he was extending each syllable, rendering them somehow sinister. I do hope I did not scare you. Scare me? No, not a bit of it. No. Quite the opposite. The opposite? He was smiling at me in a way I didn't particularly care for. How do you mean? Opposite. What is the opposite of me scaring you by opening the door? Again, he was lingering on every word, as if tasting them individually and finding the flavour delicious. A smile played about his eyes. He was enjoying the discomfort he wrongly thought he was causing me. It was dashed annoying. I just meant I hoped I didn't scare you. Being here. A pretty solid counter from old Artridge, you'll no doubt agree. Ah, I see. No, do not fear on my account, Mr. Artridge. You do not scare me. I was simply coming down for a berretto de notte. Berretto de notte? Oh, a nightcap, I see. Yes, me too as well. An unkind observer might be inclined to think my imprecise speech was in some way related to Criminate's presence and the inexplicable screech of the chair, but I assure you it was the result of fatigue only. And perhaps the port. For evidence of my total comfort at being alone at night with an avowed criminal, I submit the next sentence I casually laid before the cove. I was actually just thinking about you, Don Crimine. How did you and Lady de Planus get on with your search? It was very good. In the attic particularly, there are some very interesting things. Such as? Just a couple of pieces of art that will fetch a very good price. Perhaps even one or two that maybe should not be in the collection in the first place. I think Duke Richtenstein has been, how you say, naughty boy. This is good news for me. You were supposed to be looking for drummer, not casing the joint for profit, I snapped. My irritation at his languid way of talking had got the better of me. Drummer? No. No, he I did not see. It occurred to me that a very good reason Crimine did not need to expend energy searching for drummer was that he already knew full well where he was. I went on the offensive, yet another thing a scared man wouldn't do. You don't seem very concerned by the fact you're apparently sharing this island with a killer, Don Crimine. Oh, why would I be? The most damage Mr. Drummer could do to me is to talk to me once again about his boring, boring business. He digs holes, big holes, but I do not care. Maybe you don't care about drummer, but what about Betty? She's dead, for goodness sake. He really had got under my skin. I fear I may not have been presenting the most dignified of fronts by this point. My tie had come askew, and I could feel my hair was no longer marshalled as I'd wish, whereas Crimine was still as well put together as when I first saw him, not a thing out of place. He was casually helping himself to a drink. If he had killed Betty, and perhaps drummer too, he'd obviously managed to do so without ruining his outfit. Everyone dies, Mr. Artridge. It is a certainty. All it means is the value we place upon their work goes up. This cook, Betty, is, as you say, now dead. Yesterday, her food would just have been fuel, but now the meals she has prepared for us will last us until the boat returns on the Boxing Day. They are rare masterpieces, limited editions. I can't believe you can speak so coldly, Crimine. He withdrew the silver pick from his mouth and span it on the sideboard, his entire attention apparently focused on the rotating skewer as it flashed in the light. Oh, of course you can. I already know what you are thinking about me. How could you possibly? I began to protest, but without looking at me, Crimine raised his hand and clicked his tongue. It is a trick I learned as a child in the old country. I can read thoughts, Mr. Artridge. Do not scoff. I talk not of spirits or magic. I simply watch and listen. Between the way a person moves and what they do not say, I can see and hear what they think. Absolute balderdash, I blustered. Okay, you have been thinking perhaps drummer he is being framed for the murder of Betty. More, you are thinking perhaps it is I who did the framing. Maybe my plan is to make you all sleep with the fishes, or maybe I just need to create enough confusion so that I can steal some of the valuable artwork here and make my getaway. This, I think, is close, no? Oh, I will go even further and tell you that it was the priest who first put the thought about drummer and I into your head. Am I wrong? He stopped spinning his pick and looked me directly in the eyes. I'm not saying I've not considered all the angles as an intellectual curiosity, but to suggest... Mr. Artridge, it is okay. You do not need to be frightened of insulting me. I can see how you would think this, but it is not true. From the first moment we met, I have been totally honest with you, have I not? I have not tried to hide who I am or what I do. Well, that's true. So please believe me when I tell you that I do not know where Mr. Drummer is, and I could not have killed this Betty the cook as I was, how you say, otherwise engaged. He drained his glass, replaced the pick between his teeth, and treated me to such a wide smile his scar tugged slightly at his lips. Also, neither could Lady Duplantis.
What on earth do you mean?
Oh, you are not so naive as to not know what I mean, Mr. Artridge. She is a beautiful woman with an ineffective husband, and I am an exotic stranger. Make the sums, as your Mr. Drummer would say. I have enjoyed our drink, and now I must rest. I am very tired after all the exercise of the day.
Oh, it's hotting up now. Keep checking back or subscribe for the next chapters. And if you'd like to support the company, you can do that at newoldfriends.co.uk.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.